Okay, students, week 2, I have a video. Mostly this is just a quick video. There's a lot of code here that's already done. I wanted to show that we have the capability with encapsulation to hide data within the program, but also I wanted to show that we can make more advanced versions of programs and construct programs a little more intelligently when it comes to the general construction of a program. First of all, I do want to point out a couple of things. You're going to see me utilizing a class, or actually multiple classes, and as a result of that, if you go over here on the right hand side in the Solution Explorer and you're looking for the classes, they're not going to be there because of how I constructed it, but when you're doing it, you would right click on the item and you'd say add class and create your classes there. I'm using a different method simply because I'm trying to do it a different way, and I didn't really think about it when I was making this. If you want to see the other item, the library of classes is here, and you can see I've done one for names. Names is first name and last name. Address is all of the items for addresses. For address line 1, address line 2, city, state, and zip. Names is again first name and last name. It's set up to do a little bit of validation. You might remember if you had .NET 1, week 5, we validated the string to make sure that the first name and the last name didn't have any digits or special characters in them. So there's a thing here where when you enter the string, the name, the first name or the last name in, it goes to this valid string, and it goes through here and checks to see whether it's A through Z, and if it's not A through Z, it eliminates the bad character and just passes along the regular characters. Now you don't have to do that. There's nothing in this assignment for this week that you have to do that. I just did it because it's something that you might find interesting when we go through it, but other than that, when I did address, I didn't do that. I just set up the addresses, and I set them as get and set because of encapsulation. That's the easiest, simplest way to do encapsulation. This is in a class, and it's in a class, and all of these things are related to address, and so the class is a class that solely contains these items for the address. And you'll see how this plays out a little bit later. Now, names is a class, and it basically works with just the first name and the last name. Address works with all of the things for address, and you could keep adding classes for the various parts of an item. So person is comprised of names and addresses. Well, actually one name and one address. And if you wanted more than one, then you could construct either in person or in the main program a way to handle multiple items, basically an array of person. So that you do that in the main program. Now our program, we typically do WFA programs, so I'm doing that here, but I'm going to also show you an equivalent in the console to show you that when you create a class like person that has first name, last name, which I have here, and the address, which is address line 1, address line 2, city, state, and zip, that information is completely portable to a console application. So if you're doing it in console, I'll show you that one also. Now, I didn't finish this one completely. That is, I didn't do all of the stuff for address, and you could add on various different items into person by adding classes. I'm not too concerned about if you just want to add in everything that you want into person and then to create student and then add a few things into student. That's not really an overwhelming concern to me. But keep in mind that when you're doing student, basically you're just inheriting person anyway, so I'm not overly concerned with that. Okay, so let's take a look at this code for a little bit. You'll see these little things here. They're XML comments. You can take them for whatever they're worth. Okay, so because of the form, it runs by clicking the run button here. And when you do that, it collects everything from the form. And the one thing that you will notice is that there's, I create person, and when I do that, it picks up this thing and it is instantiated, but it kind of double instantiates here. That is, when I pull up this, let me show you what happens. Let me squeeze into a blank space here. Okay, so person is person, the variable is P. I hit P, and then I hit the dot, and I have a choice of address, or A names. Okay, so if I hit names, and then hit tab, okay, and then I hit the dot, or the period again, you'll see that I have a choice of first name, F name, or last name, L name. Okay, and so that's the first two that I do. I bring in those two from the form, which are marked txt F name and txt L name, and of course the text properties. Now, when I have the address that I want to bring in, I do P dot and then A address, and I prefix them with A because they are what I call an atom of information. An address is kind of a group of fields, not just one field, because that'd be kind of silly. This is an address. The names are A names because they are the first name, last name. If I were developing this as a much larger scale program, I would probably put title like Dr., Mr., Ms., Mrs., whatever, and perhaps a suffix like, you know, the first, the second, the third, whatever. So anyway, address, a address, and I hit tab, and then that's there, and then I hit the dot, okay, and then you see a line 1, address line 1, address line 2, city, state, and zip. Okay, now the one thing that's different about the way I have entered the state in this is that you'll see here on the design thing that there's a drop-down box, what we call a combo box. You haven't used it before, but it's not a big deal. When we're entering this into the state property here, the state field, if you will, I've called it CBO state for combo state. And then it's dot selected item dot toString to convert it to a string. And it's really easy to deal with in that respect. So we collect the items from the form. Then this is just corresponding output. If there was something to do with the form, like processing something, doing some work, etc., it would go here in between between input and output. In reality, there is a little bit of processing that happens because when you enter the names here from first name and text name, last name rather, when it goes in, it is checked for bad input and converted, fixed. Let me see here if I can generate a thing. So if I were putting in, I don't know, I'm just going to call it first name, but I'm going to make a mistake on purpose. You'll notice I put in a exclamation mark on the first name, and under last I'm going to put in a @ symbol. Now I need to fill in, like, I don't know, Purity Lane, and I don't need to fill in the address line 2. It's an optional field. I'll make this wonky city. And when I go over here, I have a selection of states. I didn't put in all the states, lazy typing. I'll make this one Alaska, and then zip code. I could make a drop-down box for zip codes, but definitely not that, not that industrious. Now, when I click Run Me, I have first name, last name, Purity Lane. Okay, so you'll see here, despite the error that was typed in on the first name, it converts it, fixes it. you can see it over here on the left. And then last name, it converts it to last. It takes out the bad characters. So if I were to finish just the address portion of this, oh, and by the way, this is just setup information on form load, where I do away with all of the label texts where it says label 1, label 2, label 3, etc. And I added the states to the combo box. Okay, so here you can see the only part that I did was address line 1 and address line 2. And I know you're thinking, gosh, that's a lot of typing. It's not really that much typing when it comes to actually typing it in this editor. All of my label names, I name them, of course, all with the prefix LBL. So if I type in LBL, those are my label names. So I just have to select the one that is appropriate, in this case city, and hit the tab key. And then of course you have to type text, so you hit the dot. And then text is so common that it's the top of the list oftentimes. So you can just tab and it'll go up there. And then space equals space. You don't even have to do the spaces. All you really need is the equal sign. And then P is person, and then dot, and we're on a address here, so I can just do tab, and then we're up to city, so you do have to go down to city and then tab and then semicolon. The editor does provide you an awful lot of shortcuts when it comes to these type of things. Back over here, LBL, next thing down is, let's see here, we've done name, city, state. Okay, so we're down to state dot text, and again you can just hit equals here, P dot address dot state, and you can see there that it put the space in between around the equal sign automatically. LBL zip dot, and then tab equals P dot address dot zip, semicolon. And so that particular section is finished, so I can do this. And so an address, I'm going to say 123 ASDF blah 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 street, address line 2 I don't need, city, because we've definitely got to make a city called that. Go over here, and we'll put it in Missouri, because why not? And I don't know, 65123. I don't know if it's a zip code or not, but it sounds good. And we go over here and click run, and you can see that it's put my name in and the street in, and it skips the address line 2 and puts in the city and Missouri and zip code. And there are things that you could add in that would completely make this into a normal looking address, like take out the spaces. There is a command for trimming the spaces out of two things, so you could put these two together and into one name. You could leave a blank line out if you didn't want it, and so on and so forth. I just didn't go to that much trouble for this. Okay, so all of this is input, all of this is input up here just underneath person, and it takes care of all of this type of stuff. And then if you had anything that you wanted to do, you could call a class and do that particular work, and then this is just output. Are you required to make this specific thing for output? No, but you'll notice that it does make use of output from person. But that's the entire graphical user portion of this assignment, and all of it stems primarily from person. Now what's interesting about that is if you were to block off all of this stuff on the input portion to the right and on the output portion to the left, all of the stuff in those respective areas is part and parcel, all of person. And all of that stuff is the same whether you put it into a graphical program or whether you put it into a console program. So as an example, in a console program, and by the way, you'll see a lot of green squiggles here. That's because the console program doesn't really support, the console unit doesn't support some of this more advanced for lack of a better phrase, it isn't real happy with me using some of the more advanced object-oriented programming features. So it allows it, but it'll only run in Windows 7 or later. So I have person P declared here just as I had in the GUI version. Person P equals new person, console. Now here I have a bunch of write line statements. The write line is the closest thing that you're going to have to an output statement, and this is just here to tell the user what to do. I mean, I could leave off all of the write lines here, but they are a prompt to tell you, hey, user, do something. Otherwise, it would just be a blank screen, basically. So when I do this, you see enter first name. I get tired of typing my name, press enter. Enter last name, press enter. Address line 1. Again, I don't need an address line 2. I can just press enter. Enter city. So again, city and state. Now the only catch is here there is no drop-down box, so I have to pick a state. And zip code, I have no idea what the zip code for Maine is. I'll make one up. And then I press enter, and you can see that there's the line that divides the input area from the output area. Now again, I didn't put in the rest of this particular section of the program, so down here in this I have console, and again that's a very common one, so I type a C, capital C, I hit the tab key, I hit the dot. Right line is very common for this, so it's at the top there. I hit the tab key and it brings that across. I hit open parentheses and you'll notice it fills in the close parentheses, and I'm going to put in P for person, dot, and again we're up to A address, so I hit the tab key, the dot, and we're up to city, so I can just hit city. To get city, I can just highlight city and then hit tab, and then go to the end of the line, put in a semicolon, back to the beginning, console, dot, right line, so all I have to do is hit tab again, open parentheses, and P, dot, tab for A address because it's highlighted, dot, city, we need state. Now at that particular point, I think I can just hit S, yep, hit tab, and it'll fill it in, and then I'm going to hit close parentheses, semicolon, console, so just hit capital C and then hit tab because console is the only thing that's valid there, dot, right line, and again P, dot, A address, dot, and Z for zip, hit tab, hit the end key, and the semicolon. Once that's done, then we can run this again. Address line 1. Don't need an address line 2. City. State. Alaska. I have no idea what the Alaska zip code is either. And is there anything else? No. Okay, and then you see underneath the dotted line there is the basic address that I set up. I could have put city, state, and zip all on the same line. I didn't do it. You know, I did it up here. I could modify that. City. address. City, state, and zip. Probably should put. I can never remember where the comma goes. Isn't that stupid? Oh well. Anyway. Need that. City, state, zip, and that. Okay, so not a lot of difference here when you think about it, because if you're looking at, you know, how we're getting our input is p.anames.fname, and if you look at the GUI example, it's the same thing here, p.anames.fname, and we're just taking it from the form instead of from a read line, like we are here. Similarly, when we're doing output, we're doing output with, like, say for instance on the address line 1, address line 1 is output with p.addressline1, and on the console again p.addressline1. The differences here stem just from the specifics of using something for a prompt. We don't really need the prompt as much in the GUI, although we a lot of times use, in the graphical user environment, we usually put a label above something so that the user knows what it is. Okay, I didn't bother, I know what it is, yada yada yada. But if you were writing something for a professional program, you would definitely put something that tells the user what something is, because if you don't, the user will find a way to mess up your program. what else? When you're outputting in a form, all you have to do is set something equal to the form item, like a label or a text box, and it will simply display it. Now there is one thing to keep in mind with console versus GUI, and that is that when you're using console, people get hung up on this whole thing with main. Anything that's going in main with console, all of that stuff that goes in main on console, when you're doing a graphical user environment, you should add a button, and it's the same stuff that's going into here, basically, except for the fact that instead of using read line and write line, you should be working with the stuff that's on the form here, your components on the form. The primary reason for that is that if you use console commands, they won't show up. I mean, they're there, but they won't show up. What else? I opened 3 windows. Oh, I know what the other window is. And again, this is just if you were to create, like, say for instance, names and address, in you know, to create person, then when you did that, then when you are working with it in either console, person P equals new person, or whether you're dealing with it in the GUI, person P equals new person, you would go here to the project name, and you would say add class. You wouldn't do what I did here, which is I created something called a class library, which is a whole group of pieces that are collectively added to the programs. And you'll see that up at the top here. I called it week 2 library. It says using week 2 library. And so anything and everything from the way I created it would be added automatically, whereas yours would be added by clicking this and again add class, and it'll add it into here, and it will still be automatically added. It will just be less trouble. And so for students, that's something which you can do, and it's a lot less trouble. If you were developing on a program with a lot of different people, every person would probably have pieces that were appropriate to the part that they were working on. So let's say that you were working on a large-scale project that was an accounting program. You would want to have potentially pieces that were perhaps brought in, things that you've written before that were part and parcel of, let's say that you were working on general ledger, or you were working on accounts payable, and maybe you've already done transactions for that type of program. You could just already have those written and stored someplace, and you could just bring them in to your program. I'm not going to go into that too much. You don't have to do it that way, and you probably shouldn't do it that way, because there's a little bit more involved in doing it that way. Just make your classes that you're going to use by right-clicking the project name. When you do that, just so you know, there's a thing up here which is called namespace. Okay? And you'll see that it's the same name. If you look at this name is the same as this name over here. And this is the namespace name. So if you right click it and you say add, add class, and I'm just going to call it class 1 here. So you can see here it called it class 1, but you can also see that this became the same name as the project name. The project name here is the namespace name. So if you were looking here, it's the same namespace. And because it's the same namespace, when you create a class like class 1, and you go into your, I don't want that open. And if you were to go into your form and you wanted to instantiate that, you can see here that class 1 is already available, and you can call it whatever, it doesn't matter. Equals new class 1, oops, and it's ready to go. The way I did it, it's not that simple. So yeah, it's just something which mine adds a level of complexity, but it also adds a level of simplification for what I do. For you guys, simply using the project as the origination of the namespace makes it simpler for you guys to handle. Is there anything else that you need to know? Not really, except that when I'm doing this, one of the reasons why I'm doing this, setting these on the left to the values that came in, is part of the encapsulation because when we look at names, for instance, you're going to see a get set, and this mechanic that comes in here, yours doesn't need to be this complicated. I'll show you in a minute. The only reason mine is because that it comes in from the form, sticks it in here, but before it sticks it in here, it goes down here to valid string, fixes whatever problem there may be, and then sticks it into, you'll see here, underscore L name and underscore F name. Those are private and they can't be touched by anything. They're encapsulated. Now, in address, all you see is get and set. And what they've done here is when you set a variable, when you do something either from the form or from the console, and you say your input variable is equal to your input thing, whether it be from the form or whether it be from console readline. It sets it and it stores it in a hidden private variable, if you will. And then when you do the get, it returns that variable that really only the internal mechanism knows about. So, I mean, it's well and truly encapsulated by doing it this way. The only catch is you can't do really anything with it with just get and set. What I did under names is I manually had it sent to valid string, which is a whole method which goes through, checks to see if there's a problem. If there isn't, it simply returns it. You can see it here down at the bottom, return retval, and when it returns, it goes into the private variable, which is up here at the top. Same thing with L name. It's checking for the same thing. Are the letters somewhere in the neighborhood of lowercase a through z or uppercase a through z? If they are, great. If they aren't, then it goes through all of the letters one at a time and it checks to see if it's a valid letter. If it's not a valid letter, it skips it. If it is a valid letter, then it adds it on to the return value, and when it's finished going through the entire length of the string, then it's finished, and the return value now holds the fixed string, and again it comes out of here and assigns it to underscore F name or underscore L name. So then when you're doing output in the main programs, where you're doing it, whether it be console or whether it be forms, and you're saying the output thing is well, let's say in console you say write line and then specify the particular field. When you do the p dot, say for instance, when you do p dot names, well, a names, and then first name, it passes back this value in the return statement. So you have it for the right line. When you're doing it with the form, you say txt fname dot text equals p dot names dot fname, and it goes into the to the actually it's in the label LBL fname dot text. It goes to there for output. So yeah, you're more than willing to. I'm going to scroll through this a little bit. Let me get as much on the screen as possible. Oh, and by the way, you could put all of this into, basically you could put all of this into person. If you wanted to break up a section of it into multiple parts, then you could put, like, say for instance, the first name, last name, and all of the address into person, and then you could put the rest of the things they show in the handout into student, and then just have student inherit person for the first name, last name, and address information. But basically what we're talking about is to try to encapsulate it, and when you have encapsulation, that almost inherently means that you're going to use get and set. It's not a big deal. Lots of ums here. The idea is to hide data where it's necessary. Valid string, by the way, is also private here and is only visible within this class. So we have a couple of private strings. We have some encapsulations that's occurring right here. And we have the valid string method, which is only visible within this particular class because it's not necessary anywhere else. Okay, so again, GUI example. The only reason I did this was to show you that they're really not that different, and to make sure that you understood that that with the WFA programs, we try to do really just the part that we need to do for getting input that we need to have on a button view, click button, just on a button in general that brings you in. This does the job. If there was anything specifically that needed to be done between input and output, then we could do it right here. Typically we would call a class, and that class would kick off doing whatever it is that needs to be done. Just keep in mind that all input and output to the form has to be done here. And then this, of course, is output. Okay, so input, process, output. It's kind of a mantra for computer science, and that's true also in your console version. Input, if there was processing, it would be here, but again, there wasn't any for this assignment. And then output. And up here, we do have write lines, but the only reason for having these write lines for quote-unquote output is to prompt the user. And again, this is the only part of this program that's not part of, say for instance, the details of person. Oh, and by the way, enter first name. Again, if I were to enter a bunch of digits along with the letters, last name, and some special symbols, let's see, address line, the address doesn't do any special processing. City, in fact, none of the things after the names do anything special. I could have done it on the zip code, but I didn't. And again, notice that on the first name and last name, which is the top line here, even though I entered DD1234, only DD got printed out. And even though on the last name I entered GHJK $%, it only entered, it only let the last name be GHJK. It didn't allow the special characters to show. It removed them from the name entirely. And I don't mean it just doesn't show them, I mean it literally removed them from the name. Okay, so I hope that gives you a little bit more to go on, although again this gets to be a little complex just because I didn't do my classes in this thing. But again, if you do your classes here, and that's totally fine, you can just say add class right here, and it'll work just fine. You know, change the name, add the class. And it'll go in here, and it'll be right next to your program. Not a problem. Okay. And that's about it. Hope this helps.